So for the other people who are still here, if you want to continue asking questions, if you place them in the Slido, I'll just paste that again in the chat. And we'll pick up on any questions really from today or any other things you want to ask about EOSC. So we'll have members from the FAIR and architecture working groups here. I'm just going to share my slides, share my screen rather, because I tried to pull together what I think are the open questions. And there's a few at the start about GAIAX. Can you see that, Andreas?
I can see this, yeah.
Okay, excellent. I'll just make this a little bit larger for everyone as well. So there were a couple that were still there in the Slido. Some of them may have been addressed because I was kind of like multitasking in that last session, but one's about the user communities for GAIAX, things about your use cases, the value chains and the reference implementation you're using. I don't know if you'd like to just pick up on some of these.
How should we proceed? Should I do it in Slido as a response, or do you?
I think
should we just verbally now?
Just verbally answer okay. Now. That's fine.
In terms of the first question, of course, the initiation has been done by industry actors, because the starting point of GAIAX was the platform industry 4.0, where all the concern raised, yeah, we are capable to collect data out of our processes, we have digital twins, we have sensors, we have industrial IoT, and so on and so on. And now I have to make a decision. If I want to make use of AI, for example, I need to find a provider, or I invest in my own premise activities, which is quite expensive. But if I step into the model of, let me say, one of the hyperscalers, I can see a reasonable vendor login, and what is even worth, I'm going to share my domain competency into these technical infrastructures. And this is intellectual property again, not just the data, but also the level where the data occurs, what are the processing entities, and so on. And this then came to the conclusion we need to have an alternative model, and I want to make my own choice. This indicates already, of course, initially we are talking about the industry actors, and it's really, for the time being, the discussion is more in a B2B level. But of course, if you look further, all the EU citizens, scientists, and everyone else can participate on this concept if you do it right. And therefore, we need this multi-stakeholder exchange. We need to understand the priorities, for example, from the science community. But we need to be very careful, because this initial idea of GAIAX has been also hijacked by this high-level objective of digital sovereignty. And then the field is open for any level of ideas and concept which serves into this question of digital sovereignty, but which cannot be solved by GAIAX by itself. So this is a more a wider discussion also about AI and ethics and whatever. But for the time being, we would like to scope on some first implementation or on first solution patterns, and let's go from there. And GAIAX is quite agile for the time being. Just saying, with 1 year, we had 500 people who were working pro bono. So there was no funding at all. Everyone was committed just on this objective. We need to do something for the European economy. And yeah, we can extend it, but this should be done step by step. And if we have already early indicators and some quick wins, if we put this into the considerations of GAIAX, we can also serve for scientists or for citizens in general, for example, with identity management. Then, yeah, we should take this into consideration, but I cannot yet confirm that this will be on the highest priority for the roadmap. Well, the next question is about the GAIAX use cases. Yeah. We made some stock taking, and to be honest, half of the use cases I was looking at, these are all the old-fashioned digital transformation use cases, which do not suffer of reasonable infrastructure or solutions on a technical level. It is more the willingness of the stakeholder to move forward. And what we would like to see, if we talk about use cases, Well, they should really address the key solution space of GAIAX, as well as the requirement of scalability, because any of the use cases can be done by today with the resources which are already there. It is not a problem that you cannot start. It is not the problem that you cannot deal with the data, but when you come to a situation where you have where you want to extend this model with multiple entities or multiple entities who are working together, if you face the problems of governance, of transparency, and also to the avoidance of vendor lock-ins, then you probably need GAIAX, not more, not less. So and there are some use cases for for example, for service management, for smart living, for agriculture, which I think now we are really getting to the real use cases where GAIAX can help. And all others, make your homework, go forward and define your business model behind this data-driven approach. And then in parallel, GAIAX will provide you the ecosystem that you can move forward with less individual interactions. It's a reference implementation of GAIAX. Yeah, we are working now for around demonstrators just to showcase how GAIAX can work. And hopefully it's not just the old-fashioned cloud provisioning approach. So what we really need to showcase the interaction between the infrastructure and the data space layer, and also to get a better understanding how data spaces can be built up, also with all the security considerations. And again, we need to think practically. We cannot solve everything at the same time. And if you raise the barriers up and up and up and up, you will never see any solution. So be calm and keep some room to deal with data. Also, if it is potential personal identifiable data. And as long as we are taking care within a controlled environment, we need to find more options to work with the data and to identify the valuation of data. So this is just a recommendation. I don't know if it works, but at least this is a level of discussion we have to do also in a public-private partnership with the government, for example. Okay.
I'm conscious we're firing lots of questions at you at once. So I don't know if you want to just give any kind of concluding remarks maybe about, like Patrick's question, how you're going to kind of build on the experience from EOSC or things that have emerged for you from the sessions today or potential collaborations.
Well, I think we should spend some time, not exhaustive, but if you spend 1 or 2 days just to understand the key high-level objectives, the barriers you're facing, because you are already progressing since more than 3 years, and then sort it out. What is at least potentially addressable in GAIAX, and what is your own purpose? And if we then scope on those overlapping areas and do some offerings or get do some questionnaires or get your opinion on this, then this would be the first point, and this can be done already this year. And then for the next year, we should also consider how to implement real infrastructures which probably serve also the EOSC high-level requirements. I cannot state it right now, but we will have this discussion, and probably by end of this year or beginning of next year, at least we have a joint understanding where to go. This can be one of the options.
Yeah, exactly. And I think now is a perfect opportunity for that, because obviously EOSC is itself going through a transition. The new EOSC Association has been set up. So I think starting those conversations and looking for the opportunities to collaborate, as Rupert and Edith had highlighted at the end of the last session, is definitely a good time to do that.
All right.
Is there anything else you'd like to reflect on about GAIAX or?
Oh, well, I think it's a good idea. I'm totally convinced whatever is the outcome, it will help us to move forward. So there are a lot of reasons why GAIAX might fail or is not in the right direction, but any effort we are putting into this discussion is fruitful for you and is necessary. So I can deal with all the pushbacks. I don't care, honestly. I really think whatever we do makes sense, and if you do something for European sovereignty, this is really necessary.
Yeah, excellent. Thank
All
you
right.
very much, Andreas.
Thank you, and enjoy your session further on. And,
yeah, no, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
So, as I mentioned at the start, this is a very kind of free-form drop-in session. We've scheduled these each day, this Ask Me Anything clinic. It's really an opportunity for us to pick up on questions that hadn't been addressed in the earlier sessions, maybe because we ran out of time, or some other things that have emerged as you've watched through the different sessions. So I've been looking at the Slido, and I've tried to pull out and group the different questions here. There were some that had come out of the morning sessions around AAI and PIDs. I think we have Klaas on the line, and hopefully Raphael as well. So they can maybe pick up on some of these questions. And there are also some general ones that have come up around things like the business model and stakeholders for EOS. So we can perhaps pick these up afterwards. So I'd propose that we maybe pick up on the AAI and PIDs stuff first. I don't know if who would like to address these. Somebody wants to unmute. Is Klaas still on the line? I thought I'd seen his picture before. Or Raphael, if you want to pick up on some of the PIDs questions. Or anyone from Federal Architecture. Raphael, we can hear you.
Yeah. Then let's continue with the questions towards PIDs. First, Philip's question about fake, false, or Reynolds metadata on PID records. Well, this is a serious issue indeed. And as previous discussions, specifically in the chat, have also shown, quality is a tricky notion in that regard. If you interpret quality to be fit for purpose, then it depends on purpose. But either way, the fact that in the architectural considerations, we do not really stress that has a couple of reasons. One being that this is more in scope for the accompanying policy document. From a purely functional perspective, in terms of system requirements, one could infer from that some means of control, typically access control, specifically for adding and editing, but still that doesn't guarantee things to be correct for whatever notion of correct. So at the end of the day, I expect this to require professional and expertise support. But you could also infer from those considerations that it may be worthwhile to think of ways in which insufficiencies or errors could be reported, flagged, or anything similar to that. And I think we do cover that at some places. But yes, this is a serious issue, and it won't disappear through mere technical means. I think it is more of an governance and community issue first and foremost.
Yeah, I think Philippe may want to come in on this as well. I don't know if you want to extend the question, and you can unmute. Yep.
Well, yes, just to say that we are facing that kind of issue, for instance, with spatial data, data from satellite, or data from other fields that we are using in a numerical weather forecast model. And so there is a clear need for having metadata that are, I'm not sure how to say it in English, autoportant, with self-description within it. That's very useful if you need to have a data flow, a workflow an automatic data flow where you don't have to open and to read by a human being all this file. But our experience on that is that sometimes error happens, and it's always very tricky when you have that kind of self-description. I can provide an example. Sometimes with one coordinate, and one coordinate that's not something that is really easy to see by a machine. And if you take a wind field on the one coordinate, well, and you push that into some kind of data treatment, well, it will work exactly as if it was with the right coordinate, just that the result is completely false. So that's an example of the need for this metadata self-description and the issues that could arise with it. And of course, when we are dealing with high-performance computing, exascale high-performance computing, we'll have a hell of data. And so we will need to have these PIDs and these also AI to help running the workflow. But with this special issue and special care, that's it. Thank you for taking my question.
And I think we can find a lot of examples similar to the one that you just put forward. So by no means did I want to imply that this is a non-serious or trivial issue, all the contrary. But the scope of the presentation was the status of the architecture working group, which is mostly concerned about system design. And I've limited the presentation to the identified gaps from a technical perspective. But anyway, point taken. And I think this also actually answers to a certain extent Romain David's question. Again, this was not in scope of the presentation, but we are very well aware of the fact that indeed there need to be authorities controlling PID provisioning and management. And to a certain extent, there are already. But integrating or connecting that to the European Open Science Cloud and building on top of that is certainly worthwhile. Then Patricia has asked, sorry?
If we can just for a moment, I noticed class is back online now. So I'm wondering whether we should take the one AAI question and then carry on with the PIDs, because there's quite a few different PID questions.
Yep, sure, fine with me.
Yeah, okay, Klaas?
Fine with me as well. And apologies, my whole system came to a complete standstill. So the only thing I could do was reboot. Yeah, so very good question and very true and very hard to do anything about. So we basically try to attack this problem at many different ways. If you look at what I presented, the ARC blueprint architecture is one way of dealing with this. What the ARC blueprint architecture enables you to do is insert a proxy in the flow between the identity provider and the service provider, and that proxy acts as an IDP towards the services. And that means that a collaboration can add the necessary attributes for the collaboration at the level of the community. It also our GAIAX implementation of the ARC BPA edu teams has the notion of an identity broker that allows you to bring in alternative IDPs, so also social IDPs, and again enrich those authentications with the specific attributes. But I think at the same time we try to make the value for having a proper asserted identity higher and higher. And that works on the opposite side. That comes from making more and more useful services available for the users to essentially make them knock on the door of the IT people in the university and say, hey guys, what's this? I cannot do my research. I cannot access, well, in the case of student service, I cannot access Spotify with my university credentials, etc. So we try to shoot at all levels, and hopefully by doing that we can lift the whole baseline of identity provisioning in the R&E community up. But it's an uphill battle. I'm not going to deny that.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Klaus. So perhaps if we continue, we've got about half an hour left. If we continue with the PID questions with Raphael, and then come to some of the more general ones, I'm actually going to paste the link to this Google Doc in the chat as well, just so you can see where I'm grouping things. But I'm trying to take things from the chat and the Slido, so post your questions anywhere you like.
So then I think the next one on the list is this question from Patricia. Can our community use PIDs in place to join EOSC if they are compliant with the requirements? This is more in scope of the rules of participation, but this is, well, I would say, while still evolving, I interpret the support for and use of PIDs a requirement, and in which way exactly, I don't think that is actually, that is still to be specified. In terms of the recommendations that we are making, so what I've outlined during my presentation, a lot of that was referring to things that are non-existing or purely developed or premature or anything, as we've been focusing, and I in my presentation specifically, been focusing on things ahead of us that we consider worthwhile developing or expanding on. And so for at least at this point in time, there's, these things can't be made a requirement for participation. But supporting and using any of the PID systems today, I would say, is certainly a good idea. The next one then...
actually, just one quick reflection on that. I'll paste the EOSC PID policy into the chat as well. That's just been released as a final document, so you can see what we're expecting of PID providers. But I think a general principle we're working to in EOSC is that we're building on what's already there. We don't want to be, you know, expecting different things of people. So building on existing standards and the PID infrastructure and existing metadata schema. You know, we want this to be a federation and something that, you know, works for existing community practices.
And actually, while you are making that point, I think there was also a question I've noticed in the chat earlier today. By no means are we suggesting to build anything new from scratch. All the contrary, we are very well aware of the fact that there are a number of PID service providers already out there in the wild, some since long, and being used, some sharing the same technology stack underneath, others pursuing different approaches using other technologies. And the challenge we see is actually leveraging those and pointing out ways how to engage in a federation of PID systems that in the end results in a system of multiple parts that provide services beyond what every single provider would be able to achieve. But I was somewhat assuming that this goes without saying when we stress this federation approach. But anyway, it's worthwhile making that explicit also. The next question here on the list from Richard, I interpret to refer to I think it's mentioned, controlled vocabularies, ontologies, and the like for PID records, and first and foremost for values expressed therein, like scientific scope, topic, scope, relationships to other things and whatnot. And yes, indeed, these are important issues, but not so much from a purely technical / architectural point of view. Again, this goes more, in my understanding, in the direction of governance, quality control, best practices, and the like, which are all important, of course, but were just not the topic of my presentation. Sorry if I sound like a broken record, because I think I've given a similar answer at least 3 times now. Isn't reverse lookup, what am I?
Yeah, sorry, it's not always easy following, but there'd been a couple of comments about the reverse lookup in the chat.
I know there's the one before, alternative to ORCID, legal problems. Again, this is, well, I'm almost hesitant to say that this is not primarily a technical issue, but an organizational issue. And yes, in the scope of EOSC, I think we all consider it important to be compliant with the GDPR, for instance, and having EOSC governed services would certainly be a worthwhile component. And I think this is of EOSC, and I think this is also put forward on many other fronts. And of course, we need to avoid, or we want to avoid, the legal problems that you are hinting at.
Yeah, and there's a comment in the chat on this from Andres Hall, who's in the FAIR working group, about ORCID being global and has the advantage. It's not necessarily a liability.
Well, I was interpreting that question a bit more general. I don't want to pick up on the example of ORCID specifically, which we actually did provide a brief account on in the document. So while, well, those who know me and some others from the working group may be aware of the fact that we have quite some familiarity with the handle system as technology, we've not been limiting our work in terms of scope in that regard, but we also consider other concepts and notions and providers of PID and PID-like systems to be valuable parties here as well. So no restrictions on that side. Isn't reverse lookup fundamental? Well, in terms of discovery, yes. How come does it not low priority? Well, first of all, the priority discussion has only just started. My interpretation, and why I also personally have not voted that up, again in the context of these technical considerations, is because at least some technology stacks do actually provide support for doing that, at least within a single PID system. More often than not, it's actually the decision of the PID service providers to not enable that for their services for reasons mostly related to performance concerns, because this can put a lot of stress on your service. Again, you can then say, okay, if that is a serious issue, then those systems need to be scaled up. We've touched on that explicitly as well and made that a separate point. And the other thing related more to the federation aspects is when you want to do a reverse lookup across several service providers, potentially using different technologies, then of course you need some kind of umbrella service or entry point that can maybe dispatch or just ask all and these kinds of things. But it is comparatively straightforward in terms of technology effort. one, because it's already there from a technical perspective in many cases. And second, it's not that much that I think, and I think others may think similarly, is needed in order to make that happen. And so I guess what I'm saying here is our priorities at the moment are mostly informed, or at least also substantially informed by the amount of effort that in relation to its potential importance. And so I think it is for the assumption that it's not so much effort why this priority is low. But anyway, I guess with that I've covered most.
Yeah, very well done. I'm very glad you were here to answer all of those. And I'm conscious, apologies that we're putting certain people on the spot with lots of questions in the way that I've structured this. The remaining questions are much more general around EOSC and widening. The first question is, one that either Michaela or Rupert can address, and then the others, some of them are quite challenging, like the business model. And I don't know, I'll check if anyone from the EC is still on the line to answer the one about consolidating efforts. But Michaela or Rupert, would you like to address the first one around when the study will be available?
Sure, happy to do that. The official date for the publication of the study was set at 6th of November. That one was planned to have all the T's crossed and dots on the I's or whatever. But actually we will be able to do that sooner, because we have already processed all of the feedback from the sustainability working group, and therefore my estimate is that we will be able to deliver already next week. So we are a bit sooner than planned.
Ahead of schedule, which is nice to hear.
Ahead of schedule, yes, that's right. I mean, as I say, it's already been processed, all the feedback, and it's very, very useful feedback from the working group. So, and we have added whole new section actually as a result. So, but just our value added basically was all the information was already there. So, in respect of some of the other questions, maybe I can pick up on the concern about creating new silos, because actually. I would argue that, of course, silos is used very much as a dirty word, but I would argue that domain knowledge is incredibly important to be preserved. So we do discuss this idea of, oh, are we all working in silos and we need to collaborate, etc. We are all on a mission to create a space for collaboration. However, we also need to be very careful to preserve domain knowledge with the relevant domain terminology, the individual semantics that are attached to each domain. It is not useful to create, particularly at application level or at deep research level, terminology that is universal across the board, because this terminology has been evolved over a very, very long time to focus on particular research aspects of that domain, and that is useful knowledge. So what we need to distinguish is EOSC as a guardian of the individual semantics that belong to individual domain research groups, no matter how small, and the ability to communicate across those domains. One thing that I can add to this is that on the Onto Commons project that some of us from EOSC, or rather who are contributing to EOSC simultaneously, are involved in now, and it's starting in November. The launch is 1st of November. We are creating an ecosystem of ontologies. This is the ambition, not to create Esperanto, because this is not useful. The ambition is to create an ecosystem of ontologies that will allow us, at least we are attempting to create one, even that will allow us to collaborate across disciplines. Even if we take a small step for humanity in this direction, I think we will do a great deal of good for the EOSC community, research community in general. So I think when we talk about silos, I think we need to be careful to distinguish between the preservation of the individual knowledge domains and the linking mechanisms that we are now creating in order to bridge those. And on the question of the other data providers, such as private foundations and institutions, by Maggie Hellström. This is a very important point. It has come up in our study. It has been highlighted that this system of encouraging responsible research, which we have named JUST, and you're welcome to read about it in our report, would actually apply to those institutions as well, especially in institutions where data is provided and where the collector of data is not highlighted. Therefore, a personal responsibility is apparently removed, or at least that's how it appears to whoever is receiving the data. In those instances, a system like JUST that looks at accountability, so careful annotation and documentation of how the data was collected, if this becomes common practice, it also ensures very useful participation of those institutions. So I hope that helps to answer some of the questions.
Yeah, incredibly helpful. And actually much of what you said there, particularly around the importance of domains, is, you know, that's dear to the heart of many in the FAIR working group. Rupert, you raised your hand. Do you want to come in on this too?
Exactly. I think that's, I can only underline and confirm what Michaela and you just said. This is all about making sure that the domain-specific knowledge and activities can be preserved and that we can link and create the bridges. I think this is also why the importance of having this interoperability metadata framework being created. This is just to make sure we can try to tap into the other domains data and the other domains inside carefully. We also need to support these inter-domain, inner domain specific kind of collaboration, and so I can only confirm this. Regarding the studies, Michaela already answered for the widening of the public and private sector study. We will also make sure that the other studies will be appropriately linked from within the Iron Lady, and they will be made available during the next, I think during the next month, 1.5 months. In terms of the question on direct payments from Robert, is there direct payments payment part for transactions business model? There's concerns that scientists' access to resources will be managed, kept by funders, things like that. So we don't see, first of all, we see services are free at the point of use. However, nothing in principle stops the researcher or funding agency or employer to procure services in a flexible manner. And in the end, I mean, we also need to make sure we understand initially, I mean, we are gradually growing as so some of the funds will be carried by the funders and by the projects and institutions. But at the same time, we also need to realize the European Commission as one of the pillars or the tiers, as Karel pointed out, will not be able to pay forever, of course, and there will need to be a transition to the second tier and/or maybe at some point the association will grow and will maybe be able to also to have the funds to procure some of the services that might be provided. Regarding the other question on the stakeholders table regarding the ESRI research infrastructures that are not considered, not quite sure I understand which table is referred to.
I think it might have been the FAIR in Practice report, because we have 6 recommendations and map it by stakeholders. So I don't know if Marta or Rob would like to speak to that. I mean, we certainly see the value of the ESFRI research infrastructures. I think we'd maybe had research communities or research reps as one of the stakeholders.
Absolutely.
I don't see anyone unmuting on this. One other thing, because I think we've probably addressed most of the questions now, but if anyone has a burning question, by all means unmute, speak out, or paste things either in the Google Doc or in the Slido so we can pick them up. One thing that's come up in the chat is a little bit about governance and speaking about ORCID, trying to get more Europeans on the ORCID board, for example. I see there's been some comments around this. if anyone wants to speak out on some of these issues, I know the governance has come up in the FAIR group as well around governance of PID infrastructure. Françoise, or I don't know exactly who's on the line. There's too many people to be looking through numbers.
Well, if there is no volunteer, I could tell one more time the issue we have with regard to the two big silos of the European project. So actually with EOSC in one side and the EuroHPC in another side, and there is a big concern, I think, from a lot of people on how to have some interoperation between the two. We will offer exascale capacities for computation at a wide scale to Europe, and we really want to have that that could be offered within a framework compatible with EOSC. And we are really doing a lot of work to have that. This is not just one more instrument, it's really a big one. And we really want not to miss that opportunity to work together with you. I think this is really a big challenge, and with a big issue with regard to the organization and all that kind of things.
Yeah, completely. I think that's actually what struck me most in that last panel session around widening. There are so many parallel initiatives. So like the EuroHPC, the different partnerships, the different data spaces emerging. And I think we have to have a very collaborative approach. I see actually Marta's put something in the chat about the stakeholders. The report on fair practice is aimed primarily at decision makers and research funders, and the second recommendation in particular is relevant to ESFRIs. And I think generally throughout the work that we're doing in EOSC and certainly on the exec board, we have Jan Krusak representing the ESFRI infrastructures, and we've been heavily involved in things like the ESFRI workshop the other week. So we certainly see a key role there. Rupert, was that a raised hand or
it was a raised hand? Sorry, I cannot raise my hand in Zoom. So just quickly responding to Philippe. Philippe, we had this conversation earlier, and of course, as Sarah said, we absolutely acknowledge the need to establish dialogue and more closer dialogue also with the HPC community. I think we agreed previously in one of the previous sessions that there is an opportunity. Maybe you will help us organize a workshop between various EuroHPC communities. So maybe if you want to confirm, we will make sure that from the EOS side that we can push that along and then see what kind of synergies we can establish and towards a fruitful cooperation.
Definitely. So that's really a very good idea, very good opportunity. We will work on that. Just to widen the scope of the question, I think for our stakeholder, for the European stakeholder, yes, the ecosystem is really complicated. It's really complicated to understand that. We are also working to help SMEs and industry getting on HPC and simulation, numerical simulation, artificial intelligence, and tomorrow with quantum computing. And it's so complicated for that. And of course, EOSC initiative is something that could be of great use. If you can address all these technology, all these services, all these offer through the EOSC, that would be really useful for all our stakeholders. Of course, that means that they are all taken into account and that they could keep their identity. They could do what they want to do on the way it's suitable for them when it's suitable, and to have also all the other layers to help the interoperability. So we have really a great challenge ahead, and we will looking forward to work with you on that.
Excellent, thanks, Philippe. So I see two hands raised, Jean-François and François Geneva. So I think maybe if we give the floor to the ladies first. So Françoise, take it away.
After that, I will shut up. But no, I would like to say a word. You invited me to say a word about how to make the governance. We had discussions about that, of course. I am not a specialist of PID governance, but we have thought about it, about metrics. I know metrics is a word which frightens everybody, but well, they are somewhere and we have to deal with them properly. And because they are frightening everybody and for reasons which make sense, we think that we will propose metrics. If you look at the document which was posted on Monday evening, we will propose metrics, but the first recommendation and priority we'll make is to test them, or maybe the second. The first one is that communities have to understand what they want to do with FAIR, which was the previous discussion. And the second one is to test the metrics thoroughly. And we think that a good place to do that is to put people globally together, because these needs are the same probably for all the EOSC and similar initiatives. So this could go somewhere in RDA eventually, but then EOSC will have to take decisions about what they choose at one point, not now, I hope, but at some point. And the idea will really to involve the stakeholder forum and to involve deeply the stakeholder forum to have eventually, I don't know how it will be organized. We all know it will be the association who will organize all that. But we really think that these things have to be done involving the stakeholders, including the decisions on, at some point, choosing some kind of metrics for FAIR in EOSC.
Yeah, this notion of the stakeholder forum came out very strongly for me in the ESFRI workshop, because obviously we have the association, we'll have members of that, but I think we also need a very strong stakeholder forum outside of that, which engages with the different research communities, because we need to ensure that what we do in EOSC and how this develops further really picks up on those needs. Jean-Francois, would you like to come in?
Yeah, so it was about the partnership of EOSC with GAIAX or EuroHPC. So it's a generic answer. Everybody should have in their should be reminded that EOSC was a collection of H2020 projects until 2018. We are just coming to the end of the transition period, 2019 to 2020, where in particular we are getting to the point where the sustainable EOSC will exist through the association and so forth. So it's not. I want to reassure the EuroHPC, Philip, and anybody from other organizations that it's not because EOSC doesn't want to talk to anybody. It's just because EOSC was too young, right? And now we're just getting on our 2 feet, and therefore I'm sure, although I don't know who will instantiate that. I mean, the participant into the association will engage into cooperation with other organizations when they are ready. Frankly, and just to finish on that. Working on the SRIA, which in the case of EOSC is SRIA 1.0. Well, actually today it's 0.8, right? I mean, we are not even finished. I went through the corresponding document from HPC, and this is the 4.0, right? It's the number 4 release. So I don't know how many years of and how many history, how much of an history EuroHPC has, but be assured that as soon as the 1.0 is available, as soon as the association is organized, as soon as there are individuals working in the association, you will see the hand from EOSC trying to talk to you. No, the hand will not talk, but you will see the hands to engage into partnership. So take into account that EOSC is a young organization.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think that's a nice point to close on, actually. You know, we've come a long way over the past few years. There's been great work done in the projects and also by the governance structure, but it's still a fairly young initiative. And I think there's a lot of strong prospects going forward with the new association and lots of collaborations that can be formed with different groups. I think we've addressed most of the questions there. So thank you to everybody who, you know, who's joined this session, who's asked the questions, and to also everybody who's been here to respond. There is another session in 15 minutes, so you don't get very long a break, but hopefully enough to stretch your legs and get a coffee. And then there'll be a session about co-creation projects, which have been supported by the EOS Secretariat, and a few lightning talks and some more chat. But thank you all very much for joining. Do take a look at all of the documents that are online and feedback on those consultations. And yeah, goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye all. Thanks for your feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.